The purpose of this screencast is to read motivations for treaties, and it's on pages 110 and 111 in the Northern Lights textbook. Before I even read, I want to make sure I understand what's on this page. So I'm going to do path for you. Normally I would ask you to pause, but in this case, the organization of this insert will help you finish the notes that you need to take. You'll see that it's broken up into categories. Land for each, Dakota, Americans. Then we have money. And what does the Dakota have to do with money? And then Americans under the money title. Then we have lifestyle, Dakota, and how their lifestyle might have been impacted by treaties. And then we have Americans and how their lifestyle, or maybe the lifestyles of those they want to influence, were impacted by treaties. Then I have Henry Sibley, who is going to be an important figure that's going to be brought up in this reading. I also have this Dakota elders that are in this photo here, and they apparently had to travel to Washington, D.C. I would imagine that had something to do with the treaty. And then we have a picture of treaties themselves. And one thing you will notice is that a lot of times the Dakota, because they did not read or write in English, would have to X their names instead of actually write their names on the treaties. So there's probably a communication gap definitely between the U.S. government and the Dakota, and we'll see what role that might play. It's also a good idea to preview what you need to do while you read. So you're going to be finishing Reading Purpose 2, Motivations for Treaties, Learning Goals. Students will know why the Dakota and U.S. government signed treaties. You have already finished this before reading activity with your teacher. While you read, you're taking notes, and you'll notice that this is laid out very similarly to the reading. So you'll read the insert on pages 110 and 111 in the Northern Lights textbook and fill in the blank by finishing off the sentence prompt with an appropriate phrase. So I have Dakota and then land for each, and then it says we should sign the treaty because, and you list 3 reasons. For the Americans, land for each. We should sign the treaty because, and 3 reasons for the Americans. I will pause and come back to this. So, to start the reading, motivations for treaties, land for each, Dakota. When it came to signing treaties, some Dakota felt that they really had no choice. They saw how powerful the U.S. government was and worried it would take over their lands no matter what. Treaties would allow them to reserve at least a portion of their land and control their own future. To some, establishing a reservation where the Dakota could live as they wanted was a reason to sign treaties. So now you're going to stop. You're going to go back to your sheet, your worksheet, and under Dakota, under land for each, list 3 reasons, if you can come up with 3, based on what we just read, for why they should sign treaties. Pause and do that. Americans. The Americans also had reasons for wanting to make treaties. Many believed their nation should expand across North America. They considered Minnesota an important part of that expansion, but they could not legally settle on American Indian lands unless treaties were signed. Alexander Ramsey set out to convince the Dakota and Ojibwe to sell their land. In a speech to the territorial legislature, Ramsey proclaimed that Minnesota was destined to become the land of American settlers. And here Ramsey said, "I feel a conviction that this country, once thrown open for settlement, would be peopled with a rapidity exceeding anything in the history of the Western civilization." And he was right. Lots of European Americans came to Minnesota. You should go to your worksheet. And now, what reasons under land for each did the Americans have to sign treaties? We should sign the treaty because, and try to come up with 3 reasons. Pause and do that. Money, Dakota. The Dakota recognized the fur trade was ending. Many of them believed that the annuities they would receive by signing treaties would allow them to buy the blankets, tools, and food necessary for survival. The Dakota elder, E. Yang Mani, known to the Americans as Running Walker, was among those who believed it was necessary to deal with the U.S. government. And here's what he said: "The Great Spirit does not smile. He growls at us. Something does not suit him. Our cornfields, where are they? Our young men cannot hunt. The powder in our rifles is wet. It will not burn. We kill no game, nothing. So he's noticing that things are changing and the Great Spirit is lashing back for some reason. In addition, some Dakota were in debt. They needed to pay back what they owed to the fur traders. The fur trade was not as profitable as it had been decades before. The pelts the Dakota brought to the fur traders were not worth as much as they had previously been. The money received would no longer pay for everything the Dakota needed and wanted. American traders such as Henry Sibley used their kinship ties with the Dakota to pressure them into signing treaties that would help pay off those debts. So in this case, the traders were working together with the U.S. government, which is interesting. So now you're going to want to go here under money. We, being the Dakota, should sign the treaty because, based on what you just read, what 3 reasons can you come up with? Pause and do that. Americans. The fur traders were also in debt. In past years, money from the furs brought in by the Dakota had covered the cost of goods American traders purchased. As fashions changed, as fashions changed, the demand for furs dropped, and so did the price. In the 1830s and 1840s, Sibley and other traders were going further and further into debt. These American fur traders had several reasons for encouraging the Dakota to sign treaties. If the Dakota agreed to a treaty, they would receive an immediate cash payment. Sibley and the other traders planned to get some of this money. Then they too could pay off their debts. The traders also saw an opportunity to make money buying and selling land that would be available once treaties were signed. Sibley was Minnesota's most powerful fur trader. He also served as Minnesota's territorial representative in Washington. He played a major role in the treaty-making process and wrote, "The Indians are prepared to make a treaty when we tell them to do so. No treaty can be made without our claims being first secured." So, interesting. Henry Sibley, fur trader. So now we want to come back to our notes, and under money, why would Americans want to make treaties? And those Americans in this case might be the fur traders. So the fur traders or the American government, we should sign the treaty because, and pause here based on what you read, why should they sign? Pause. Lifestyle, Dakota. The Dakota could see their homeland changing. Newcomers were arriving to the region in large numbers, bringing with them a different way of life. Unlike the fur traders, these people wanted to settle. Some Dakota saw treaties as a way to preserve some of their land. They believed having a reservation would provide them a place to continue their traditional lifestyle. It would be the land that newcomers could not settle on or control. It would be Dakota land forever. So now, turning to our notes, under lifestyle, we, being the Dakota, should sign the treaty because, pause and fill that in. Americans. Most Americans believe the Dakota should adopt European American ways. Adopt means take on. The government planned to use some of the annuity payments from treaties to teach the Dakota new skills and ways of life. So the payments that the Dakota were making were reserved for setting up schools, for example, to teach Dakota children how to live like Europeans. Often, this was achieved through the work of missionaries, who also encouraged the Dakota to accept Christianity instead of their traditional religion. The missionaries also wanted the treaties to include plans to teach the Dakota to farm like American newcomers. Missionary Stephen Riggs wrote the Dakota's close-knit communities disintegrate them, encourage them to be thrifty farmers rather than poor villagers. So, based on what we just, there's more. This plan to make the Dakota stop being Dakota and adopt American ways was called assimilation. It was designed to teach the Dakota how to live in a world that was dominated by American ways of life. Many Americans did not realize how devastating this change would be to the Dakota. So now turn to your worksheet, lifestyle. We should sign the treaty because. So Americans had a motivation to sign treaties, and it wasn't necessarily their lifestyle that was changing, but how did they want to make the Dakota change their lifestyle? Pause and fill that in. Now that you're done, you're going to move on to the Part 3 review portion. You will circle the group most likely to have made each statement. So pause now and finish these two questions.